This is Al Fritsch at earthhealing.info. We are doing a visit today to a site along the Little Miami River, which was also the location, in almost pure sand, of the novitiate which I attended, junior 8, the early part of the Jesuit training. And during the time I was there, 60 years ago, the Father Paul Allen, who was superior, got the people who were attending, young novices and juniors, to take part in building a wall that would save the property from the erosion of this river that you see here, that looks to be very placid right here, but truly became a raging river that would eat away the sand that would undercut the very buildings on which we were located. And so they built a wall, making it of concrete filled barrels. And those barrels 60 years ago was a real environmental project, and it succeeded. It stopped the eating away of the property that we had, and it has actually existed ever since. And so we will take a look at that in the course of the time, and we will talk to some of the people who were there and who were the builders of this environmental center that was blazed away 60 years ago, 1959. Around the corner of this very slippery bank is that line of barrels that you see, and they've held all through these years. Take a look at them. They're filled with concrete. It took a lot of time to do it, and we'll talk to some people who took part in that.
House of Homeless here? Yeah, they come down and bring it in. Sammy the Bull would send his guys in. Yeah? They come back here by boat and be on the barrel. All the way down. We have one more Benz.
Hey.
We have one more Benz. Oh, I think this is where we stop.
What's your name?
I'm Mark.
Okay, so you saw the barrels from the river and they look okay?
Yep. I mean, I've been up down the river 6 miles today, and I've seen a lot of, wall erosion projects on the river.
Yeah.
There's people, all kinds of different things.
I bet.
And I was surprised to see the barrels. I said, that's an innovative technique right there.
An early one.
and I was surprised how well it's held up. It's in really pretty good shape.
Yeah, and it looks like when the river's high, it gets up there.
Yeah. This river floods pretty good.
It does, okay.
Yep. And I was glad to run into you because you told me how old they were.
Yeah.
60 years old. I was wondering how old they are.
Yeah.
But they've held up well. Yeah, not many things hold up well on the riverbank,
I'm glad to hear it. They'll be glad to hear it too.
Yeah, they did a good job.
Yeah, I'll tell them.
I was impressed.
Thanks.
Innovative.
Very nice.
I'm talking to Tom Cooper, who's a lawyer from Lexington, Kentucky, and we'd like to ask you, Tom, some of your thoughts about putting up that wall. Have you got some things that you remember? And of course, you've created a memorial for it too.
Well, the bluff just collapsed. I'll say it was in late winter, early spring, but maybe March. And so, at any rate, I got all this secondhand. But Father Allen got together with the engineers and said, "What can we do about this?" And they told him, if you don't put up a wall down there, a retaining wall, you're going to lose the rock house and the perimeter road. And they put a price tag on it. This is 1959 of $75,000.
Oh, is that right? I never heard this story.
Yeah, so that was the price tag. And so Father Allen, who was the rector of the seminary, he decided he would just do it in-house. And so I don't know why he picked my buddy Jim Zeller. Jim was 20 years old, and there were several people in the seminary who had engineering degrees or engineering education, put it that way. And but he picked Jim Zeller, and So the question is, how are we going to go about doing this? You know, well, they came up with this idea of getting barrels, 55-gallon drum barrels, and the Cincinnati Energy Company, utility company, ended up providing the barrels for us.
164, is that the number?
Nowhere near, 589. 589. That line roughly stretches 100 to 125 yards, and at places about halfway, it's 4 barrels high, and the rest of the way is 3
So
barrels
it really
high.
is that number?
Yes, I got that from Jim Zeller.
Okay.
So at any rate, the idea was to fill those barrels with stone and with concrete, and to lash them together with cable. And so, and then once we built the wall, then it was to get some fill and put in behind it, a lot of fill, and then, you know, hopefully everything, you know, get some bushes and some willow trees and things like that. It'll take a quick root, and then it would stabilize the slope. So that was a plan. All right. Well, the concrete mixer was provided by Dick Bowman's father, who had a construction company, and so that's set on the bluff right up there by the rock house, or right near the rim of the bluff. And then Nails Hardner, remember Nails?
That's right.
He came up with the chute to get down to the shore. And so he came up with this jury-rigged chute, and it was bent steel and some kind of barrel props, you know. And then it ended in this bend down at the shore. And so they would mix up a batch of concrete, and then when the guys down below were ready for it, some signal would pass, and they'd shoot this concrete down this chute. And it would sluice down there and collect in the bend. And then the guys with wheelbarrows would go up there and draw a wheelbarrow full of concrete. And then it was, you know, initially it was pretty easy. I was a wheelbarrow guy, and it was pretty easy because on the first level, the first tier, you know, if you lost your balance, you weren't falling very far. You know?
Yeah.
So, but at any rate, it took some while to get the teamwork and the precision going. But once we completed the first tier, and like I say, it stretches about 125 yards, then everybody kind of got the hang of it, you know, and then the second tier went quicker. And then by the third tier, it was just, you know, we had it down pat. The idea was to lash them to each other, and then you pour that concrete in, and then there's plenty of rock around. You just add rock to it, you know. And so it was all, and you know, I don't remember seeing any surveyors getting out there and surveying.
Right.
You know. But at any rate, we started, I would say, in late April, and we finished in about late September. And,
What a summer.
The summer.
yes, all through the summer, and there was no conscription. Anybody that worked down there was a volunteer, and it was we had pretty thin crews at first, but after that first line went in and everybody could see what was happening, they got the crews picked up. Okay.
Yeah.
But Tom, that was sort of like environmental education. You had that. I mean, didn't that stick with you for the rest of your life, that you could do things like that?
Al, that's one of the biggest accomplishments of my life. I'm not kidding you. I take such great pride when I go down there and check that wall out, you know, and I do it religiously because I come up here to Milford quite a bit. And the first thing I look for is any breach. And so far, I haven't spotted any breaches. And then I look for rusted barrels. Well, there are a couple, but not many, not many. That thing's just about as solid as when we put it in. You know, where we had to curl back into the bank, you know, it was actually a curve. And so Jim Zeller was really worried about that, because if the floodwaters of Little Miami really got up and took that on and wiped it out, well, there goes the whole line, you know. So we did double barrels there. We had them back to back.
Okay.
Really critical.
And it's a landmark now. Like the paddlers coming down talked about the barrels. And so you've done an important thing to save a building, and also to create for yourself an understanding that you could do something to change the world, right? Years before there was an environment.
You know, the thing about it, Al, is that when we finished the project, we kind of dusted our hands off and moved on to whatever was next, you know, studies mainly.
You're right.
And it was hard to get that out of my system. I mean, I had a hard time settling down to the studies after working on that wall all summer.
Right.
And then the camaraderie we had down there on the wall. They, you know, it was just great team spirit. And one of the guys said that brought us together like nothing else, you know. So at any rate, they would, you know, for lunchtime, they would send a truck out with lunch, and we'd eat right up there on top of the bluff. And a lot of times, Father Allen, the rector himself, was down there working with us, by golly. So good leadership
He's a
there.
good man.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Glad to help.
I know you want to go back and meet. This is Dick
It's
Bowman,
casual.
Father Dick Bowman and John Thyssen, who were juniors at that time here at Milford. Do you have some things to say? Because I think you got hurt in one on the building project.
Well, yeah, I did get hurt. The main thing is these barrels, which you see from the river, are each filled with cement and rocks from the riverbank, and they're threaded through by cable. So that was the way to make a wall. Line up these empty barrels, fill them with rocks and concrete, spin a cable through them. Actually, you do the cable first. And the cement was dumped into wheelbarrows, and the wheelbarrows then would roll out over the barrels and dump in. Well, I was standing in the container that held the cement. And while I was in the container, after a couple of days, my legs began to burn because the lye from the cement got into my boots. That's my injury, but it was worthwhile.
Still a worthwhile project.
Oh my God, yeah.
We didn't get workman's comp.
Because I mean, it not only saved the bank, it saved the house on top of it.
Yeah.
And John, what are your stories?
Well, my story is I was a wheelbarrow pusher and gravel shoveler. I was in a lot better shape then. And I remember thinking what a kind of dangerous adventure this was we were having. I mean, because we were pushing wheelbarrows full of cement along planks down the side of a cliff. And it was serious business. And I just mentioned one of our adventures was a man named Paul Schindler, an ex-Jesuit, who was driving a pickup truck filled with gravel. We interspersed all this with gravel. He backed it up to the edge of the cliff and was going to dump the gravel over the cliff down to where we were working. But he had forgotten to unlatch the gate at the back of the truck. And as he lifted it up, the whole thing tilted backwards, full of gravel. And he was about to somersault back down the cliff when a bunch of us, who none of us weighed very much, jumped on the front fenders of the truck. And it kind of teetered and went back down.
That's great.
And it would have been
We'd say the Lord was with you.
the Lord had to be with us because nobody got really hurt.
Yeah, well, that was a good point.
And it was a dangerous operation.
We're interviewing Terry McGovern, who was also here in the building of the wall, but his memories are a little bit shorter, he says, but I'm sure he's got some vivid ones. Can you remember the wall?
I do remember the wall. I do remember the storm that changed the course of the Little Miami River.
Oh.
And that then brought the concern that we could lose the rock house because of what had happened to the river and to the land between the river and the cliff. So we had to deal with that, and our rector at the time,
Paul
Allen, wonderful man, Paul Allen, put together a group of men to address it, and he gave to Jim Zeller the leadership of it, to my remembrance, and we weren't required to work on the wall. It was all voluntary, and we would spend our recreation time, we were all students, what downtime we had, helping out on the wall. So the crews were constantly changing.
Okay,
Yeah.
John Mansfield is
Yes.
with us from, I think, somewhere east.
In Virginia.
In Virginia.
Loudoun County, Virginia.
Okay,
Find
Virginia,
us.
the
Find
mother
us.
of Kentucky. But anyway, John, we're so happy to have you as one of our interviewees on this 60th anniversary of the building of the wall. And we've been saying that this is an environmental operation that was a success.
It was. Yeah.
A very great
The
success.
cliff is still there.
So, right, so tell us a few comments that you have.
Well, I remember the terrible storm, and I remember how shocked we were when the cliff fell in.
Okay, so that wasn't brought up before. Tell us.
Well, it had a lot of rain.
And of course it
and
gets
then
high.
Then it stopped, and then it started again. and eventually, just one morning, the whole, I don't know, about 20 feet, I think, maybe, fell out there. Well, of course, I was a junior at the time, and there was nobody knew quite what to do, but Jim Zeller took command and convinced Father Allen that, it's going to rain again. And let me show you, it took him out there, and he later pointed out to me that here's where it fell off. And then he walked back 30 feet and says, see this little crack?
Oh, right.
Yeah. So Jim actually convinced Father Allen as opposed to
he did his field work. He did the field work for him.
Okay.
And of course, Jim then convinced Father Allen that Jim could motivate people to do it.
Yes.
And so I give him the greatest credit for being general and for assigning people duties, like putting Hank Wayman in the cement bucket. Remember that?
No, I didn't work on it.
Oh, you didn't work on it?
But I went away that summer.
Okay.
And so I wasn't there.
They worked the system. I mean, this is Milford, so they were professional beggars here. And, and the professional beggars, being Jesuits, knew all the big men in town, the guys that owned cement factories and welders and things like that. So we suggested they could be of help so we got barrels, cables, and
everything
cement.
was given.
Yes, and lumber, and we engineered ourselves a method to get the concrete down the slope. We engineered this big box that they would dump stuff, the cement in, and then it would, when we meter it, to course down a chute into another box that had a guy in it who would get it the right place to drop into the barrel.
So it was all worked with system.
It was as a system. And
let me ask you a deeper question. Has that stayed with you all the time?
Well, I can remember it, but I don't know if
But didn't it have an effect on you?
Oh yeah, it was wonderful to work as a crew like that. In fact, I did. I've done that many times in my career. Impossible job, and we'll find a way to.
So you really felt that was an experience?
It was. We at least we had a noble end, a noble effort, and something to show for it without disgracing ourselves or killing anybody.
We have been at Milford, Ohio, where I spent 3 years of my life, and as I was leaving, they were making these barrels. I didn't really take part, but a lot of people did, and we've heard some of the comments from them. All in all, it's lasted a long time. But more than that, environmental projects are such that when people take part and they succeed, they themselves succeed in what they're doing. And so in many senses, this was education, and a very important part of education that was environmental before there was even a word of such a thing as environmental education. As we conclude, we say, we are to be, as Jesuits, we are to be educators. And this was an educational project that succeeded. 60 years ago, they're still here, pinpointed as the barrels. And as we leave the property, we remember again that in much of our life, making this world a better place is something that we have got to do by doing concrete projects of a sort that will do good for other people and for ourselves. This is Alfred from earthhealing.info. Come and visit our site sometime.